Well, hello, friends, and welcome once again to another edition of the 360 Experience podcast. I'm your host, Tim Brahim, and today I bring back a repeat guest in the 360 Experience, Caleb LeGrand. Caleb LeGrand is one of the top originators that I have ever known. He is so talented and such a great teacher and such a tactician and a professional as an originator, which is greatly needed right now in today's market. I mean, this is a market where really creating separation from competition by being truly outstanding at what you do is very necessary. And Caleb's still doing a lot of business. I mean, the guy hasn't had a year in the last 11 years where he hasn't funded 300 loans, and there's good reason for it. We're going to get into that today. We're going to talk about rate shoppers. We're going to talk about his presentation. We're going to talk about what he is doing and saying right now with clients in this tight inventory market, and specifically how he's consulting with them and helping them see that now is still a very, very good time to buy, but he does it in a very ethical way. We're also going to talk about his loan process. We'll touch a little bit upon that. He's an expert at executing the perfect loan process. And I just encourage you to sit down, take some notes, pay attention, because this is going to be an outstanding episode. Before I get to the episode of the 360 Experience with Caleb, I want to just say thank you for listening. I want to thank you for being a subscriber to the show. I'd encourage you to forward this on to anybody that you think would benefit from it. And give us a like on your favorite podcast channel like Spotify or Google or YouTube, whatever it is that you're watching this on, because it really helps us out a lot when we get likes and when we get more subscribers. So without further ado, my friends, welcome to Caleb LeGrand, faculty member of the Loan Atlas and dear friend of mine in the 360 Experience podcast. Caleb, what's up, bro?
No day in paradise, right?
Do you know how much I brag about you when I speak out in public these days?
I'm not aware, but thank you.
You are like my poster child. I did two big trainings this week. One in particular, there was almost 2,000 people on it for UWM. And I was teaching on the perfect loan process, and I had a quote in there from you. Remember, I asked you a few weeks back if you could give me a quote about it, and I put a picture in there of you. And hey, I mean, you know what? Seriously, I don't think I've ever said this to you. Thank you for being such a great client. Like, I mean, I'm sure you can imagine that, like, as a teacher, it's a pretty unfulfilling job if nobody implements any of the crap you talk about. And you're one of the guys that implemented the crap. So thank you.
You were an amazing mentor, and I just said, I'm just going to do what Tim says. So I mean, it's pretty much whatever Tim says, let's do it.
Well, in the intro, I talked a little bit about, your history in the business, so people are familiar with that. And, 11 consecutive years of doing, 25 loans a month is awfully impressive. And certainly you had years where you did even more than that. Let's talk currently about the market. Like, I know that the environment has changed. And if there's one thing that I know about you is that you always have a really tight finger on the pulse of what's going on. I mean, you're a leader in your community. You talk to a lot of buyers every month. And I know that there's a lot of stage fright out there. First of all, this is actually an interesting stat because you're a man of stats. So I'll be tapping into your statistical mind here throughout this conversation. But like, how many leads a month are you averaging right now?
Right now, and to be clear, when we mean a lead, someone who's raised their hand but hasn't necessarily gone under contract, correct? Just to define that for you. They got
a heartbeat and a pulse, and you've talked to them at least, or at least you've had some dialogue.
True leads is running about 65 a month right now.
And that's pretty darn good. Now, it's interesting. I was coaching Pinky Shaw earlier this week, and we were going over some of her statistical numbers. And what I'm seeing in doing this with clients is that their conversion ratio is much lower than it is in other markets. Are you finding that to be the same for you?
I actually was surprised because I ran our numbers. So looking at last year, we processed 557 applications and we closed 261 transactions, which put us around about a 64% conversion rate. So that was actually applied to close. I thought I was running much lower than that, but we went through to run that metric because we were looking really hard at our credit report stuff to go, how do we best handle dealing with credit reports? So I was a little surprised at how much higher that conversion rate was. And I don't say that to brag. I thought it was only batting about 23 to 28%. So it was a pleasant surprise for me to see that, hey, that was much better than I had anticipated or thought. The conversion to contract right now is down dramatically because we have a lot of clients who are approved, but the difficulty is finding placement for either the house they want or, whatever the reason may be. I think there's some reluctance and hesitancy right now. Recording this in March of 25, which is everything going on in the headlines economically, that until that settles, I think clients are just a little more skittish than they normally are.
Yeah, let's talk about the current economic environment. This will air, probably in about 4 weeks. And with the way things have been going here the last 4 weeks, I mean, who knows? We may own Greenland and Australia by then. Who knows?
That's right.
So the question that I would have, I was talking to your good friend Mike Watson, who's a terrific loan originator. We were talking on Wednesday. We were looking at his numbers too, his lead to conversion ratio, and his numbers are, he's finding he's having to talk to a lot of clients to get applications going because a lot of people are just not feeling really confident about moving forward, writing an offer, all of that kind of stuff. What are you hearing out there, and how are you dealing with it more importantly? I mean, how are you coaching your clients around the issues of tariffs, around the issues of a potential pending recession, the misunderstanding that often comes into the equation with, oh, there's going to be a recession, property values are going to go down. So let's get some presentation skills out of Caleb LeGrand now.
So I think it's never more important for us as originators to both have a market opinion and also be educating and oriented towards that teaching mindset, because just quoting rates has never worked, but even more so in the current environment where it's difficult. I mean, I think any professional right now, if they're being transparent, can say, I don't have a lot of clarity in what I think is going to happen over the next 2 weeks because it's trading truly off of headline data. If you can tell me what the headlines tomorrow are going to be, I can tell you how the market's going to react, but neither you nor I know what those are going to be. So I think you have to set clear parameters with clients around what are your goals, why do you want to do this, and what do you think is going to happen? Because some of this we've not really ever seen, where we had a global pandemic, we shut the entire world down, we reopened it all together, and we went from 2% to 8% and all of that fun stuff. But my pushback to a client who thinks waiting is a good plan is, I don't see how that's going to be in your benefit if you're ready to buy now. If rates do in fact fall, then we're going to have more buyers come off the sidelines, because there's a huge swath of buyers, in my opinion, that didn't execute in the last 2 or 3 years. That millennial generation, if you look, first-time home buyer pre-COVID was an average age of 32. Now we're sitting at 38. So all of that demand has just been shifted down the line where they're having that household formation. There's still a lot of people who would love to execute on a home. And as rates drop, since that's pretty much the only lever that's going to get pulled on affordability, there's going to be more versions of you, Jane, and Tom trying to go buy this house. So if we see rates fall, housing going up would offset any economic benefit. So I think now is actually not a bad time to buy, because you're seeing more price cuts and more seller concessions than we've seen, at least in my market here locally in the upstate of South Carolina, in the last 36 months. So I don't find a compelling economic argument to be made of delaying that decision. And it's really, if you're ready to execute, now is not a bad time to buy. It's not the most amazing time in the world from a rate perspective, but that's something that can be modified at a later date through that refinance opportunity if we do in fact see rates fall. I'm of the opinion, I don't think rates are going to get much better than probably mid to high fives. It's just my personal opinion. I hope I'm wrong.
And so that's what you would say to a client, essentially all of that.
In a more elegant manner, yes.
No, that was elegant in and of itself. So do you use any presentation tools when you're presenting that? Do you show them any charts or anything like that, like household formations versus, new buyers annually coming to the market due to demographics and all that kind of stuff? I mean, how do you present this information other than just verbally?
A lot of it's verbally, because I found that, trying to present all of that within the presentation is a lot for a client to take in. And then what we use for follow-up is we are using some of the stuff out of MBS Highway to show some of the data for demographics. I also really like Altos Research. That data is live. I mean, it's even more current and sharper than what NAR can provide. So that drills down to those zip codes of those areas that clients are looking at to show them, look, here's list of price ask, we're not seeing huge discounts, like, well, housing's going to fall. Well, we're only seeing an average of 32% of homes take about a 3% discount. We go back in time, that's well within the historic average and norms. So there's not anything in the data that supports your position of this is going to change dramatically. So if you feel like this is going to lead to something, the data doesn't support that. So if we're making a non-emotional decision, that would be my counterpoint to you, Tim, if you were a client. But ultimately, you're in charge. It's your decision on when to buy, and I'm here to help educate and provide the best advice possible. but that would be my position as a professional.
So there's a few things I want to extract from your scripting there that I think are very noteworthy. Number one is you are taking a very authoritative and opinionated approach. I mean, you're not being confrontational, but you are saying in a very eloquent and kind way that, like, I don't really agree with your thesis that waiting is a wise thing because there isn't statistics or historical data that supports that. The other thing that I really want to point out is that you're and I know this about you. I mean, I've known you for a long time, and one of the things I respect the most about you is that you're an ethical salesperson. You're not even really a salesperson in my mind when you get down to it. You're an educator, you're a teacher. And from that educational and teaching place, sales happen as a byproduct of adding value and educating people on what it is that they need to know. But what you're also not doing is you're not putting your neck way out there and making promises that you can't keep, which unfortunately there are a lot of originators who I know that will run with data that is put out there and put their neck on the line. I mean, there were some originators that I knew 3 years ago when we were just starting the downturn that were really selling prospective buyers hard on the fact that, if you don't buy now, it's going to hurt you. And that really hasn't been the case, that it hasn't hurt you if you haven't bought in the last 3 years. It's just that you probably haven't benefited either by sitting on the sideline and continuing to pay rent.
And I would push back on that statement just slightly. I mean, there has been some economic harm, depending on the market. Like if you're comparing us to Austin, yeah, Austin's actually having price cuts, so delaying was a good buying decision. Here in our upstate local market, we've appreciated about 4.8 to 5.2% year over year. So your delay of buying has resulted in you paying a higher price than you could otherwise have paid for that home. And that's really my strongest point to a client in the current market. I mean, I'm open to hearing from someone who can provide data to the contrary, but everything seems to support that we're probably going to have about a 10-year additional bull run in housing where it's not going to go backwards. It may flatten out, like we may have a couple of periods where maybe we only do see 1% to 2% appreciation, so maybe prices flatten, but there's nothing in the cards. I mean, for God's sake, we drove interest rates up to 8.25, and that still didn't slow down house price appreciation. And if we're in a declining rate environment, you got the Treasury Secretary saying that they're closely monitoring the 10-year note and they want to drive that down. In theory, that should help bring things to moderate. And so what I shared with realtor partners and builder partners just 30 days ago in the update was, I don't see rates being a hindrance for us this year, meaning I don't think we're going to go back from the 6.5 to the 7.5 and that type of thing. But I also don't think they're going to be a significant tailwind for us until maybe late fourth quarter. So good news is rates have sort of taken a back seat at the moment. And now we just get back to the good old fashioned, what do you need and how can I help negotiate this transaction for you as a seller or a builder trying to move their inventory? So that's how I would push back a little bit on the no economic harm piece, but that also is going to be market dependent.
So how are you helping clients emotionally that are reticent to write offers and getting more comfortable with it? Is it loan product that you're presenting? Is it getting them to think into the future of what their interest rate will ultimately be because you're going to be able to monitor their mortgage for them and lower the cost of that debt in the future? Is it a combination of the two? Share with us a little bit about how you are hand-holding people and maybe getting them to move forward because you believe that it's important that they move forward, but not being pushy in doing so.
I'm reluctant to try to make the promise of a future rate reduction. And the reason for that is in my market, so my average loan size last year was 302. So for us to promise a refinance for a client, generally we need to see about a 1% improvement in rates. And I don't know that I have a strong opinion that we're going to see that significant of a drop. It's just very hard to read the tea leaves that far out. I'm not saying it could not happen, but I wouldn't want a client making an economic decision as big as the purchase of their home on the basis of, hey, if you're not happy with the payment today, don't worry. In 12 months or 24 months, I'm going to be able to drop this because rates are going to come down. And, my position is always, you need to make sure you're comfortable with the current economics. And there's a lot of things we can do currently to make that more affordable. Maybe it's we put less down and we pay off other household debts or bills to help create more space in your monthly budget for you as a client, which that's a lot of what we're doing in our market. Since we've got a lot of clients with a large amount of equity, it can be very much the, hey, let's wipe out all the consumer debt on your balance sheet to create that space. And then, yes, your house payment is higher, but we're leaving you net the same. Instead of paying a mortgage and 6 credit cards and a car payment, you're now just paying a mortgage and it's the same monthly cash flow, so your budget doesn't change. And then, of course, there's the commitment of we will happily be monitoring your loan to ensure that you get the best opportunity for anything that could come up in the future. But realize that may not be for a while. So you need to be comfortable with this debt burden. And that's trying to keep that as neutral as possible for that client that's making that move. If they don't have that large of an equity position or down payment, there's a lot of strategies around a temporary buy down or permanent buy down, which I've kind of swung back towards looking more at permanent buy downs, since we're not quite at that apex of rates, where we were in the 7s and the 8s. Now we're in the mid 6s. Buying down, you may be able to get a client into the high 5s, even low 4s, depending on how aggressive some of those incentives can be. And that would really be kind of a, hey, Tim, that's a one and done. We're not probably going to revisit this for you just to prepare you. And that's helping clients move forward as well.
So what that looks like, I don't want to assume, and I think you made a misstep or something in your statement there. You said high 5s or low 4s. I think you probably meant low 5s, high 4s.
Okay. Yeah, low 5s, high 4s.
Well, that's a big ass buy down, man. Okay. So what you're then, just to make sure that everybody's following. So you're coaching your realtor partners to negotiate a 200 to 300 basis points in discount points to be able to buy that interest rate down permanently, to get them a 30-year fix in the 5s or the mid 5s, something like that?
My counsel to a client is I would be less focused on price at the moment, because a $10,000 price reduction in my market only translates to about a $72 a month savings. Whereas if we take $10,000 and put it towards the rate, we can achieve maybe $120, $150 savings. And we're in a market where it's very payment sensitive. Affordability is the most important thing we need to address. So it's helping clients, how do I help you solve for affordability and making you comfortable with this decision? Because if I can solve for affordability, it's usually not a lack of desire to buy a home. So everybody comes to us super excited, I want to buy a house. I got a new job, I got a raise, we have a baby, whatever. And then we hit them with the payment. They're like, well, this sucks, I'm out. So it's helping them ride that emotional roller coaster of, well, tell me where you want to be. What do we have on the table for the puzzle pieces to help really structure that? And it's truly a much more one-to-one custom quoting in this case, in this current market, because what you do for one client may not be the same thing that you do for another client. So it's really taking that time to slow down, listen to what the client's needs are, help them solve for that, and arrive at a place where they feel comfortable moving forward. It's a lot more investment of time than I would say it has been in years past, because I'm going to be 20 years in the business this October. I would say prior to 19, that investment of time to carry a client was maybe 60 to 90 days before they executed. Nowadays, it's nothing for us to have clients that have been looking for 12 months. So you really have to help that client through that progression of, what do you need and how can I help? And having a lot more patience than maybe I've had in years past.
Yeah, so I'm really glad that you bring this up, because what I think you just described is the loan originator in today's market needs to be much more of a true deal structurer and creative in the way that they structure deals. Everything from the product to the way that they advise the client to allocate funds that they might be able to get as credit, or as you articulated, maybe paying off some revolving debt or a car or something like that and putting less money down. And maybe you do incur the MI, but still net, you need to be able to show that that's more financially beneficial to them than carrying the existing debt load that they have. So what about the topic of rate shoppers? I don't even think I've ever talked with you about this before. So recently, and I know that you weren't on the call. I don't know if you had an opportunity to go back and watch it. We had a mastermind in Leadership 360, and we were spending a lot of time, and it was a very active call around how people were dealing with rate shoppers. You've got a client, I'll paint a picture. You've got a client, you've consulted with them, they're getting close to writing an offer, and now all of a sudden they start looking at what's online. They start talking to their local credit union, and they come back to you and they say, hey, what's your current rate? We're thinking about writing an offer on this house, and you quote them a rate, and then they tell you that they can do an eighth or a quarter or 3/8% better somewhere else. How are you managing through that objection? Because I know that's a very significant one right now.
I slam my hands on my desk, curse out loud, and run around the room, and then I pick the phone back up. No, so I'll paint the picture even a little more accurately, because this just happened this week for us. So our process, client calls, we get them fully approved up front for a full income, asset, credit underwrite, and I will personally have invested at least an hour of consulting, of walking them through everything. So we had a client for whom we had approved him 6 months ago. We've been working with him through multiple offers, so we had him fully approved. We've invested the money to make sure it's a real underwriting approval up front. We have ran multiple mortgage coach scenarios in excess of 15 different houses. We had to make 2 offers where we called the listing agent, really touting how strong they were. And on the third one, they got it accepted. great news, super happy for you, Mr. and Mrs. Klein. We want to get you started, get your docs out. And the email I get back is, well, we need to check with a couple of local credit unions and we'll get back with you. So what I've done a little more aggressively, and this is not something I have done with regularity, is to try to be more upfront with what has been talked about in the master's group of the scripting of, look, before we commit the time and resources of our team, I really need to know that you're committed to us. And so with that client specifically, what I sent back to him, and we'll just use you in that role play, Tim, I said, Tim, I'm really surprised to hear that. We've invested a significant amount of time in working with you. We've done the full approval. We ran multiple scenarios. We've been available on the weekend. We've called listing agents. At this point, it's not really appropriate to be shopping lenders because all another lender can do is buy my work at a discount, because that's what they're going to do. The only thing that they can offer to you at this point is to try to better the terms that we've offered to you. And we've got a large amount of investment of time and real dollars to get you to this point. So I would strongly ask that you give very real consideration to the amount of effort and work we put into getting you to this point of what you wanted, which is an accepted home, and please move forward with us. And in this case, it worked out. We got the confirmation today that they're sticking with us and coming back to us. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like that's the perfect script and I win everything. And I have the same challenges that any originator does, and it's a knife fight out there. So all I know to do is to do my best to add as much value as possible, try to be as transparent as possible on the front end with the client of, look, this is what it is. If you want to shop, please do this now, because like credit reports are almost $200 nowadays. We've got hard, real dollars, well beyond back in the day where it's like it's $100 to approve a client. Between VOEs and everything else, you're talking somewhere north of about $600 or $700 of real dollars spent, not including any time by a team or the partner or the originator, just to get you to this point. So we really need a commitment from you that you want to work with us. And that's been the best script and the best approach. And I'd say it works more than it doesn't, but I will also fully concede that in the current environment with clients where there's less face-to-face contact and things of that nature, clients are more apt to go away from you over an eighth or a quarter or even a couple $100 in fees than they would have been in years past. And I think that's just because everyone is feeling maxed out in affordability, and you just got to get over that emotional issue with the client. And I think quantifying it's also important where, well, they're a quarter point better. Okay, that translates to $62 a month difference. And you're going to probably have this loan for approximately 5 to 7 years. Do you feel like I've provided you X amount of dollars in value? And, oh, by the way, Tim will be monitoring your loan, and there's no cost from us as a lender for you for a past client for refinance to take advantage of that. Is that not worth something to you? It feels a little bit needy and a little bit more of a begging position than perhaps I've been in years past, but by the same token, it's kind of what needs to be done to try to convert that client. Unless you have a magical script, I am all ears. I'm ready to write it down right now.
I have, well, first of all, yes, I understand your concerns that it feels a little bit needy. I actually like to look at it as applying a little bit of healthy guilt, okay, to the equation. What you're asking for here is loyalty. You have put in your time, you've provided your wisdom, and you're hoping that that's been enough to earn loyalty. And I hear it all the time from originators that there isn't a lot of loyalty out there, and loyalty is earned. I mean, to a great degree is earned. And yes, there are some people out there that might not be the most loyal by nature, but I think that most people, if they have been provided with true value, are going to exercise some loyalty. So my script is very similar to yours, what I used to use. I'll give you a slight deviation to it. I would always lean on my requirements and obligation as a leader to lead my team effectively in delivering that script. So what I would say is before we move forward, I just want to be sure that you have done whatever price comparisons that you need to do with anybody else out there in the marketplace, because as a leader, I hope you can appreciate this. I have a very significant responsibility to my team to make sure that they're not working for free. And we don't charge you for our services until which time your loan closes. In fact, there are some expenses associated with providing these services for free that we provide, including a credit report that costs $200, and certainly the value of my time and the fact that I have to pay my team whether your loan closes or not. And I have an agreement with my team that I'm going to have this conversation with you and make sure that if we are to put your file in process and get you fully approved and do all of the heavy lifting that's required on our end, that you're going to, in fact, move forward with us once you find a home. Is that an understanding that we have? I would rather know now and occasionally people say, well, no, I'm not sure that I want to commit to that yet. I'm like, okay, that's no problem. Feel free to go shop around, compare and contrast what you're experiencing and working with others and the advice that you're receiving from those other entities that you're talking to versus ours. And I'll follow back up with you in a week. Now, what would happen more often than not is the scenario that, when they would come back to me, it would be the scenario that you described. They come back to me and they say, hey, the credit union down the street has 0.25% better. I would act shocked. That's how I'd act. Say, whoa, wait a minute. I'm totally surprised that we're having this conversation because I thought that we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I was under the understanding that you were moving forward with us, which is why I had my team move forward to do all the work that they did, and we incurred the costs that we did. And I'm kind of confused as to what's happened right now that we're having this conversation. And what would happen is they would then backpedal and go, well, no, I'm just trying to get the best deal. I'm like, no, I understand you're trying to get the best deal. And I believe you're getting a great deal in working with us. Now, I'm going to add a couple of scripts in there. And I've heard them recently, and I don't know if you've heard either one of those. So these could be things that you could swipe and adapt. So one thing that I heard Barry Habib say earlier this week on a UWM call we were doing together was he was talking about the fact that the interest rate you're quoted means nothing. And in fact, the interest rate that someone locks you in on means nothing. The only interest rate that means anything is the interest rate that you close at. And one of the things that I happen to have as a strategic advantage versus most people that do what I do for a living is that I have a relationship with someone who's won 4 Crystal Ball Awards and has a very tight finger on the pulse. I mean, this is somebody who predicts the movement of interest rates better than anyone. And there have been specific times over the course of the last 12 months where people that I was working with chose to go elsewhere and they locked in, but had they stayed with me, they would have gotten ultimately a better rate because we would have timed the market correctly and locked you in at the appropriate time. So that's a script that you could use, but this is the one that I really love. So you know Edgardo Ballantyne, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So Edgardo, and I'm gonna botch this, okay, because I don't have this down. And I've heard him say it twice now, and he delivers it very beautifully. When the person says to him, I have 0.25% better interest rate quote from somebody else, he will then say to that person, okay, so let me ask you a question. If I were to match that rate, would you go with me? And they would say, yes, absolutely. And then he would say, why? And then he would just listen, and they would be kind of stuck in the mud. And he said, well, why would you go with me if I had the same rate as somebody else that you're talking to? And then they would say, well, because you've given me great advice, because you've done all the work, because you've been really kind in following up with me. And then he would say to them, okay, so those are the value propositions that I provide that you clearly think are valuable. Are you telling me that that's not worth more than $27 a month and $18 a month after tax? We're only talking about a couple of $100 a year to have all of that extra that you're getting from me and that you're going to get from me for the next 10 to 20 years. I surely think that would make sense for us to work together. Some version of that, I think, is a really solid script because
that's powerful.
Right? Because it's kind of a mic drop, because what you're doing is you're putting it right back in their face. You're letting them tell you what they've experienced is valuable from you. And then you're making them feel like they're ungrateful and somewhat cheap, that for $30 or something like that, that they would walk away from all that value. So that's kind of
really good.
Yeah, no, when he said that on the mastermind, Tyler Osby jumped out of his chair and he was like, oh my God, bro, that's like the best script right there. I'm stealing that right now.
The bad news is we're all going to use it, so it'll get worn out in about 90 days. So we'll have to come up with something new. But
none of you guys are in this. Yeah, none of you guys are in the same market.
Yeah, I know.
And there's nobody that listens to this podcast either. There's only about 11 people listening right now. So
it's been great talking to you. Wait, since I'm one of the 11, is that only 10 since I'm doing this one?
Okay, so you're a master at presenting. You just referenced the fact that you do a 1-hour conversation, back and forth with somebody, and you're presenting a total cost analysis and these types of things. So if you were to break down your conversation with the client and the value that you bring, what are a couple of things that you think that are unique about your presentation that most originators don't get into that create separation from you and your competition?
I think one of the key things, and I don't say this with any arrogance, I've had the opportunity to have a tremendous amount of at-bats over the years. So I'm a lot more comfortable being more fluid with a client in the presentation, where they may say something and I'll update the presentation right there on the spot. Oh, okay, well, what if we did this or this? And then they can see that strategy played out on the TCA form. So I don't go in with a preset TCA that we will never modify. I'm going to go in with, here's what you asked for, because we asked for, some clarity up front of what are you seeking, Tim? What do you want your payment to be? What do you want your down payment to be? What's the length that you're going to hold this house? So I have some basic knowledge of what the client may be wanting. And then, Tim, based on what you shared, this is what I presented. I want to check in. Is this what you have in mind? And then they may make some modifications to that. Or as we uncover a more in-depth strategy where it's like, well, have you thought about paying off this, 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 and this? And I may have that teed up as another option that I've got hidden because I don't want to overwhelm the client with, they pull up the spreadsheet and there's all this stuff. And it's just like, what is he talking about? So try to keep that contained and then lead the client through the journey of the discovery of this is why I think this makes sense. So trying to be purposeful in that educating process with the where I want the conversation to go, as long as it's in line and supportive with what they want. There's been times where I've gone into a presentation with the predetermined outcome of what I think it should be, and the client may share something, or they may just be very specific as to a strategy that they want. And it's like, okay, well, let's update and change to that. So I think the ability to change to that and pivot quickly where a client's not bored, because I can update that, easily within 60 seconds, allows them to see execution of a strategy where I think a lot of other originators, at least for competition around me, they'll send them an LE or a fee worksheet via email. I need to change this, this, and this, and it may take them 2 hours to come back with another fee worksheet or an LE. So it's helping that client with rapidity of response and making that educated decision very quickly on there. And I think it's also, and we've chatted about this in the past. I think we even did on the last podcast. So when I first started in the business way back in 06, I came out of being a CPA and I thought I was a very financially savvy person. And my dad really challenged me because he was asking hard questions. And I'm like, I don't know the answer to those. And he's like, you need to know the answer to those. So I think having a very high level of financial acumen to be able to handle the client who just needs help getting their first house payment we've got clients that need questions around estate planning and how does this implicate from taxes and things like that. And it's a fine line to walk. So I'm not saying you want to try to give advice outside of your wheelhouse, but you can share, my experience. This is how I've seen other clients do this, or this is the strategy that we took that approached and played out. I may not know all of your specifics, Tim, so you may want to bring in your CPA or your financial advisor. I'm happy to have the conversation with them so we can really weave this into your long-term estate and financial goals to really get you something of value out of this mortgage as opposed just to a rate and a payment. So I think you have to have that range as an originator to really add value, meeting that client where they're at and be able to handle the basic questions to the very esoteric.
So there are a decent number of originators that I now know that are members of the Loan Atlas that are relatively new in the business. They've been in the business for, just a couple of years now. And they don't necessarily possess some of the things that you just spoke to. Number one is they haven't had the number of at-bats that you have to be able to have that repetition that allows their presentation to be fluid and for them to be able to pivot quickly like you talked about. And I happen to agree with you 1,000%. I mean, when I first started as an originator, I think you know that I had a telemarketing operation, and I used to go and get direct transfers into my headset every night, 5 days a week. And I heard every objection under the sun, 150 times. And it was through that repetition that I was able to figure out how to counter objections and how to pivot quickly and things like that. So for a newer originator, how do you suggest they get these at-bats that your dad was talking about to be able to migrate their way through these tough conversations and figure it out? And then secondly is, I've become really close friends with Dan Habib. He's in the signature program for L360. He's such a wonderful guy. And I was talking to him yesterday about this, about how there are people that I watch when I see Barry speak. He's so brilliant as a presenter. I mean, his knowledge of the numbers and knowledge of the economic data is so fluent, it's unbelievable. But I always fear that there is a large percentage of the people that are watching and listening and they're saying to themselves, I'll never be that good. But Dan is a perfect avatar for that, right? Because Dan grew up as Barry's son and has learned how to articulate all that himself. So I was asking him, I said, can you highlight like what you did to become so fluent and to become essentially a clone of your father? I mean, he's almost as good as his dad at it. So that's kind of, I want to dive into that a little bit. Let's talk to the people that are listening that may say, gosh, I don't have the number of bats Caleb's talking about. And where do they go to learn this stuff? And how do they practice it? And how do they get good at it to where they can have that same degree of affluence that same degree of influence over people when they're talking to them?
I would say first and foremost, realize that we may never be as good as Barry, And if Barry was in my market, that would be highly problematic for me. So the key here is you don't have to be better than Barry. You just have to be better than everybody in your market for starters. So
Great
I would
point.
say know what your bogey that you're shooting for is. And not as just a shameless plug, I genuinely think that the Loan Atlas is a tremendous starting point for anyone in their career as a originator, even someone who's seasoned. So, I cut my teeth on your original product, Loan Toolbox, and it was so invaluable for me because the one thing I think that our industry is horrible at is there's not really clear templates for success or paths of ascension or business models is how I've always looked at it. So one of the greatest values I've gotten out of our relationship and mentorship and coaching over the years is being able to peek behind the curtain of other very successful originators and really getting to a point of understanding I don't have to do everything that this person is doing. There are multiple paths to success within the mortgage industry, which is both a blessing and a curse because there are multiple paths to success in the mortgage industry. So you can waste a lot of time being busy, but not being productive. So I think it's very useful to model success. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, and there's probably not anything under the sun that's truly new. There may just be a new or unique way to present it. So I would say invest in yourself first through the variety of tools that are out there. I think Loan Atlas is tremendous. I think the CMPS is tremendous. I think Barry's product with the CMA is tremendous. Those are wonderful places to get that base level knowledge where you can at least feel like you can be dangerous in a conversation with a client. Now, in the terms from there, I mean, you may laugh. I literally would have conversations with myself, and
Me
it would
too.
be I would miss with a client. So maybe they said, Caleb, that's really great, but I'm going to go with so and so because this and this. In my mind, I'm like, I should have said this or I should have done this. So I will replay that conversation. And thankfully, my wife is hard of hearing, but when she got hearing aids, this became very embarrassing because she's like, "Are you talking to yourself?" It's like, "Yeah, I am." So I'll have conversations with myself either in the bathroom when I'm getting ready or things like that, which is like this is what I would say because I'm monologuing or having that conversation multiple times so that when you are live in front of a client, so to speak, you've already had a lot of those iterations or at bats, and then maybe you get a new rebuttal or a new pushback on something. You can go, "Oh, I need to practice what I would have said to that because I stumbled over that." So where I found myself stumbling or I found myself not knowing what to say, sometimes it's okay to take a pause to try to collect your thoughts, but you don't want to sit there for 2 minutes going, "Man, that was a good one, Tim. I don't know. I'm going to have to get back to you." So you can take a pause to collect your thoughts. And then I think it's also okay to say sometimes, that's an excellent question. I need to do a little research to get you an accurate answer, but then practice that after the fact if you swing and you miss and just go, "This is what I could have said," or "This is what I should have said," or "This might have had more value." And I mean, I've practiced on my wife in the sense of running things by her, and she goes, "That sounded really dumb," or "That sounded really good." So I think you can do that internal practice a lot. You'll get more at bats as you practice with clients. And I would say find a counterparty, a colleague or a mentor that you can bounce stuff off of, and then invest in the tools that are available to you in the industry to swipe and adapt from others. I haven't really come up with a lot of original stuff in my career. I've really just taken what I've seen from others that work and then modified it for myself because I personally hate starting with a blank slate. There's so much energy that goes into true creation from scratch. I'd rather save that rocket fuel for maneuvering the rocket while it's in orbit as opposed to getting it off the ground.
I want to add, and I agree with everything you said. First of all, like I've been speaking quite a bit more lately. In fact, I've spoken more in public in the last, say, 18 months than I had in the previous 15 years. And I practice my presentations a lot. Like, I mean, I did that UWM presentation on the perfect loan process earlier this week. I practiced it at least 10 times, and I know that content really well, but I needed to hear myself say it over and over and over. And what I did was I actually Zoom recorded a couple of them, and then I go back and I watch it on like 150 speeds because I don't have the patience to watch it on normal speed. And I would find places that I didn't feel that I was explaining something in the way that I would want to explain it. Now, I used to do this, and I go all the way back to when I was 16, 17 years old, and I wanted to be a play-by-play baseball announcer. And I'd go to Dodger Stadium, and I'd take a tape recorder with me, and I'd sit out in the nosebleeds by myself, and I would talk to myself. I would broadcast the game. And then I would pop it into my cassette recorder on the way home, and half the time I wanted to throw the cassette out onto the freeway while I was driving home because I didn't like what I was saying. But it was from listening to where I had challenging situations, which I then did the same thing as an originator. I had a cassette recorder on my desk as an originator. I'd record my conversations. I'd go back and I'd listen to them and say, that's where I lost that deal right there, not being able to explain that. And then what I would do is I'd have to go sit in offices of my work colleagues and watch them on the phone and take notes of how they were explaining things. Now, in today's world, you've got a podcast such as this one where you can go back and you can listen to the things that Caleb's saying, but you got to put in the time, is my point. And I think that's your point too, which is, you got to take your craft seriously. And if you want to get better, you need to practice how you're delivering your content, whether it be in the mirror, whether it be to your spouse, it could be to your dog, it could be to a fellow work colleague, but you've got to repeat it out loud to the point where you feel confident in what you're saying. So I'm going to hit you completely between the eyes with what I think is the hardest question that an originator can ever get asked. And my sense is that you've been asked it and you'll have an answer for it. And I want everybody to hear how you handle this question. So you and I are in a consulting situation. I'm a prospective client. And here's what I'm going to come at you with. Caleb, I've been talking to other people out there about their interest rate products. And what I want to know is, why should I work with you?
That's always a great question. It's one I get asked a lot. And I can sit here and throw up on you and all the wonderful reasons as to why I think that would be the case. But I'd like to push back to you, if you don't mind, just politely and professionally, what's important to you in an originator? Because I can tell you the 20 reasons why I think I'm the best, and you can go online and look at the large number of reviews that we have from our past clients that are satisfied, but that may mean nothing to you. So what are you seeking in this relationship, before I answer that question, to help best address that for you?
Well, I want to get an excellent interest rate. I want to have the right loan program, and I don't want to pay a lot of closing costs, anything unnecessary, any junk fees. That's what's important to me.
Great news. You're just like everybody else in America. I've never yet heard a client that hasn't said anything different than that. So I appreciate the honesty and the transparency. I think you're going to find we're very competitive in interest rate. And we've already gone over the fees, and you have seemed like you're happy with those. So in terms of the commitments we're going to make to you in the process and the transaction, we're going to be available to help you get anything that you need ran. So running updates on numbers, timeliness in the market updates, help you get your offer accepted. We're going to do all of those things that are basics that you're going to expect of any originator. What I think you'll find that separates us from the pack is our job is to eliminate friction and address the issues before they come up and arise. And we will do an excellent job of that and communicate thoroughly throughout the process to ensure that you don't run any issues or surprises. And then we're going to be monitoring your loan over the life of its ownership to make sure that you're always in the best rate structure that you could possibly be at any times. And we do that at no additional cost. There's no lending charges from us to monitor that and refinance you for that. So that's the best proposition I can bring to you. Does that land for you? Is there any other questions I can answer for you?
No, that's perfect. Thank you. I want to just reflect to the listener. I mean, we didn't prep for this. I hit him with that big curveball out of left field, and he handled it very brilliantly. But I would offer that it's not the first time he's answered that question. He probably, I would assume, Caleb, you've probably had to practice that over and over to polish it and get it to a place of where you can deliver it with confidence.
I 100% concede it is the hardest question to answer as originator, and it's one I struggle with personally, because the real root question that's being asked is, what value are you going to bring to the table and why you?
Yep.
And that's really what you're trying to answer. And that's why I always try to get a sense of, well, what is important to you in the transaction? And sometimes it's I want the lowest rate and fees and I want the guy to be available. Okay, great. I can do all that. Is there any other questions? So it's just a matter of trying to find what's important to that client, and hopefully you get that question after you perform for a little bit to provide some value. But oftentimes that can come on the front end. That's a little harder because nobody's going to say, well, I suck and you shouldn't use me. So you got to try to find something that'll differentiate you from competitors. And I have to practice it constantly because I feel like the market is changing so rapidly, and clients' temperature and desire for that changes so rapidly that I don't think there is any one script that you can stick with that's really evergreen there. I think you really have to try to find what's important to that client and try to add tremendous value, and know that you may swing and miss. I mean, I swing and miss more than I would care to.
There was something that you had said in there about removing the friction, and I know what you're talking about, but I don't want to assume that the listener knows what you're talking about. You have a terrific team, and you have a terrific loan process. You adopted and implemented the perfect loan process many years ago, and it's been customized for you and your team. And I always found that it was significantly easier to answer that question, because that question it's a tough question in my mind, because basically what it's saying is, I need you to brag on yourself now. And that's never comfortable for anyone. I mean, that's going to put you in a very tough spot where you have to justify your existence. Okay, so I've always found that that question's a little bit easier to answer if I can divert it to some extent to my system and my team, and to brag on them a little bit rather than having it feel so much like I'm patting myself on the back. So the perfect loan process is something that, a lot of people know about. I've been doing some presentations around that subject matter lately. There's a lot of people now that are members of the Loan Atlas. I just had an implementation call for the PLP earlier this week, and there were about 80 people on it. So there's a lot of interest in implementing it. But the challenge that a lot of originators are facing right now in the subject matter of implementing the PLP is they just don't have the resources, the human resources, to do it in its fullest form, because they've gone down to their skeleton crews and maybe they're sharing a processor, but they're very intrigued by this process that can take every loan that you do and create a bunch of advocates that are out there referring business to you. So my question, I have a twofold question. I'm going to let you roll here now. One is, what's the value in the PLP that you've experienced? And then the second thing is, if you were a young originator today just starting and maybe you didn't have the size of team that you had right now, what would be a few things that you would implement from your perfect loan process that would be easy to implement and could move the needle and get the ball rolling on getting more referrals and being able to cross-sell more potential referral partners?
I would say, so to answer the first question, which is what's the value in the perfect loan process, I think apart from being able to consistently give referrals to a realtor or referral partner, if here I'm giving you a close client, this is the second most valuable thing you can possibly have or give. It's your business in a box. It's your marketing. It is what you bring to the table that makes you unique and significant in the market. And it's providing that consistent experience to that client and that referral partner time after time after time after time is what will set you apart from the pack. So my encouragement would be, it's worth the lift. It's worth the investment of time, because it gets you away from how am I going to do this or what am I going to do? Because as we've talked about in the past, over the years, if you don't have a system for selling, you're going to be subject to that referral partner or that client's system for buying. And I personally feel like that's a horrible experience, because you have no idea if they're going to be someone who has experience in this or is inexperienced. And you're hiring me as the professional. I shouldn't be wondering how this is going to go. I'm quarterbacking this. This is how it's going to go. And this is the expectations. And I'm going to do this no matter how busy or how slow we get. We're going to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and we're going to deliver for you. And that allows you to attract those other partners because they have a high level of confidence and comfort of Caleb's going to do it this way every single time. And that leads to a lot of synergy, because my referral partner is going to say, you're going to call Caleb. He's going to do this, 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 and this. And then he's going to send you back to me. We're going to do this, 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 and this. So there's no, I think he's going to approve you. Let me know when that goes. So they know that that process is consistent, which allows that much deeper and warmer handoff. And then you don't have to sit there and worry about how are we going to attack this. It's, team partner A do this, team partner B do this, and so on and so forth. So I can't stress enough the importance and the value of it. I mean, for me, it has been the core of what I've done over the years. And it's what took me from being a mediocre producer to, with some humility, a pretty good producer, because it provides scalability. It's what most every business craves and needs to have exponential growth. So that's my shtick on that. Anything you want to add before I tackle the second question?
Only that you're better than just a pretty good producer.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Your check's in the mail. So
Nice humility.
The second piece, and it's funny because I've actually given a lot of thought of this because I was asked to kind of talk about this with our group here locally. I think it's important to start with the end in mind. So just thinking back to what I know now, how I would have done things differently in the beginning, you're going to have to do everything. If you're a sole operator or your production's low where you can't afford to bring a team member on, and understand that's okay. That's not failure. That's just accepting that nothing is permanent. And the goal should be to work towards changing and bettering your circumstances. So do what is necessary to provide an amazing and excellent experience now. Mark what you want to have done for the future, where, like for my metrics, it was always every 5 units we increased, I knew that I had sufficient revenue at that point where I could afford to bring another team partner on, or I can afford to invest in additional tech or technology that would allow me to further refine my job description. So the goal should be to get down to that 20%, and I really think it's more like maybe 10 to 4% of activities that we do in a day that really result in that 64 to 80% of your outcomes that you're looking for. When you're starting out, you're doing it all. Accept that, and don't believe that anybody who's ever had any level of success didn't start that way. If they're telling you they didn't, they either are lying to you or they inherited something. So everyone starts at the bottom scrapping like that. But you need to be very purposeful in going with your time tracking. These are things that are not productive activities for me, and I need to find a way to offload these as soon as humanly possible so that you can get off that roller coaster of big month, little month, because that will be what will happen for your eternal cycle if you do not build a system to additionally allow for that increase in unit count. So track that, be diligent, and then as you hit that metric and you have the confidence, move it out. Go, okay, you're going to be responsible for this. So when you're first starting out, it's all about your sales skills, getting your at-bats, getting your scripting down, getting that growth engine that will drive that business in so that you can begin to build a team. Then the hard part is this flip from that to then having to learn how to be a good leader and delegate properly. And that's things I struggle with. My innate nature is as we got bigger, I was jumping back in to do the 80% of things that didn't really move the needle. So it's having the discipline to go, no, I need to let my team solve that, or I need to put better systems in place around that. It'll be a constant evolution. I'm still working on mine now 20 years in, and it changes because the market changes and your team size may change and the product mix you sell is going to change. So it's never done. Only Tim Brahim had a perfect loan process. I always call mine better loan process because we were always working on it. So that would be my advice to someone starting out is be purposeful for where you want to go. Understand that it is a journey and it's not going to happen overnight, but be diligent in constantly moving the ball forward, that as your production grows or your revenue grows or however you want to track your metrics, that you then take those activities that are either low productivity or low return on energy and assign those to someone else or offload them to tech, because tech is catching up really fast. There may be some genuine opportunities to offload that in a way that doesn't require hiring a body. So that is also my 2 cents on that.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say, and I agree with you 1,000%, is that if you're a solo practitioner right now and maybe sharing a processor and you want to incorporate the perfect loan process, a system of dynamic customer service where you're using every loan as you can as your ultimate marketing environment, that it starts with you selecting some things that you can do and make as a part of your everyday practice and presenting to a client that could ultimately move the needle in a way to where it would get you 1 or 2 extra loans a month. Once you do get those 1 or 2 extra loans a month, you shouldn't be thinking solely about putting that into your bank account or going on another vacation. You should be thinking about how you could reinvest that into your business and capitalize on that investment by bringing aboard somebody else to take some of the lower payoff activities off of your desk so you can do more money-making activities. So it occurred to me when I was listening to you, I want to revert back to earlier in this conversation, we were talking about lead flow. So I think you said something like 65 leads or 70 leads a month that you're getting right now. For the average originator, that sounds like a big number. For you, it's a low number. I mean, I know there were months where you were getting north of 100 easily. Okay.
It's not feeding beast like I needed to.
So when you're getting 65 leads a month, there needs to be a process for the facilitation of those consults to give you the greatest opportunity possible to convert as many of them as possible. And the average originator struggles with this because they don't have great lead follow-up because they're too immersed in their files. So it's almost like what comes first, the cart or the horse. Now, it's like if I could have my ideal situation, it would be to convince someone to invest the money, to hire the person, to take the low payoff activities off their plate so they can convert a higher percentage of leads. And you know what? Look, the easiest way to double your income is to just double your batting average. I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever made that mathematical equation before, but I mean, that's really the bottom line. I mean, if you get 10 leads a month and you're converting 2 of them, the question you should be asking is, how can I convert 4 of them? And that is all about lead flow. It's all about lead follow-up, presentation skills. What is your system for staying on top of your leads? Like, maybe walk us through it. Like, how does a lead typically come in? And then like, what process is in place to get them to talk with you? And then how consistently do you or somebody else on your team follow up with them while they are still considering whether they want to use you or not, whether they've applied and are pre-approved but haven't found a property or not? What's that process look like?
So we're probably a little more formulaic about this than perhaps you should be. So this is going to sound maybe a little bit clinical and a little bit cold, but I do think there's a little bit. I mean, we're very focused on conversion because I 100% agree. I would rather do one loan and make $1 million a year than do a million loans and make $1 per year. So if you can improve your conversion, you keep your costs down, you keep your marketing efforts down, you keep your investment of time down. But it depends on the market. Like right now, we need to talk to more people because conversion rates are down a little bit and it just takes longer. So in terms of an actual lead, which to be very clear on the definition of a lead, it's someone who has raised their hand but has not yet made application with us. We would send out a link. They go into our lead tracker system and we have a 3-and-3 process. So 3 phone calls, 3 emails. And if we don't get any responses by that 6th interaction, we archive the lead and we move on because our experience has taught us from tracking the data over the years. They haven't responded in that period of time with that level of follow-up. They're probably not going to respond. And at that point, we just become a harassment. So that's our process with a lead. And it's 48, 48, 48, 48, 48. So client calls in, we send out that lead, 48 hours, it's a phone call to check in and say, hey, Tim, I just want to make sure you got that email that Caleb sent. Do you have any questions? We know sometimes it goes to spam. Is there anything we do to help fill that out? Would it be easier for us to take it over the phone? And that's what we leave either in a voicemail or if we connect with the client. Then the email follow-up, and it's just a step-by-step every 2 days for 6 times total. And if it was referred by a partner, which is how most of our business comes in, before we dump it, we're going to check with the client, the referral partner. Have they responded to you? Have they gone somewhere else and they're just simply not interested in working with us? Or are you aware of any additional information? And if the referral partner doesn't have anything, then we just archive that lead. The notes would stay there. And if the client comes back, we have access to it. So that's how we handle a lead. Clients who apply, we don't really have a lot of fallout there because if they've taken the steps to apply, we run the app, we run credit, we ask them for their docs, and then it's a process of we want to schedule you for a consultation with Caleb. And so both of my LOAs or my mortgage analyzers or Melissa, so it makes my life super easy. I just got to remember Melissa. One of the Melissas will follow up with that client both via email and phone call, setting the expectation that the next step is to talk to Caleb. So we have a very high success rate in getting that appointment scheduled. And then my job at that appointment is to show up. We ask for docs up front, so I have full knowledge of your file and show up and provide value with that presentation to do my best to provide world-class education and world-class service as to why you want to move forward with us. And once we approve them, then they go on a rotation of follow-up. We start with 2 weeks after an approval for a resale, and then if it's new construction, that's a little different since it's a longer timeline. That we usually check in about every 90 days. So we have an immediate 3-day follow-up on a resale. And then from there, we sort of gauge, is the client going to take some time? And we may follow up every 2 weeks. Are they really looking actively? In which case, we'll follow up a little more closely. And that goes for 8 months is how long we'll do it. And if we don't get a response, then we archive that prospect. So I know that sounds a little clinical, but that's our process.
No. I mean, I think clinical is important. I mean, I think everything that you do needs to be a system. I think that if you don't have a system, then you're losing a tremendous amount of efficiency, right? And especially when you're dealing with a significant amount of lead volume like that, if you didn't have a system, it would be total chaos. I would imagine you'd be throwing a lot of bodies at the situation to try to harness those leads. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, as we wind this down, I want to ask you what you think the number one thing that originators should be doing right now to develop relationships with realtors. I know that you have a lot of realtors that you work with. I know that you have built quite a substantial reputation in your community. But let's put yourself in the shoes of a new originator right now. Let's say that you were out there and you were trying to cultivate relationships. How do you get people's attention in your mind? What's the value proposition that you'd be offering if you were just starting the business right now?
It's actually the same value proposition I would be offering even being experienced. So, I mean, yes, you get a little bit of pickup from being known, but you have to provide value to a referral partner just like you do for a client. So it's really being curious and trying to discover, and that's hard because I get a lot of calls from people who are trying to recruit us, and you've had a lot of success, and I'd like to sit down and buy you coffee and have you tell me about your success. I have zero interest in doing that, and so what would work on me is what I will often try to do when I approach a new partner because if I respond that way, I mean, we all think of realtors and other people as though they're different, like they got to have the right script or the right approach. They're human beings. So if it would work on you, it'll probably work on them. So the best approach I've always found is to have a warm introduction, somebody who knows them that can help open the door for me, that will then give them the courtesy of giving me a few minutes of their time. If you can get a few minutes of their time, that's where you can get curious and just have the conversation. Tim, tell me where you're having friction right now. What are you running into in this market? I know sometimes it can be amazing, sometimes it can be challenging. There's a lot of things we can do to come alongside you as a lending partner to help facilitate that, but I don't want to sit here and give you a spiel of 40 things that mean nothing to you. Where are you seeing any challenges or issues with what you're having for clients? And sometimes I don't have any challenges. Well, that's awesome. Do you mind sharing with me what's working? Because that's not really what I'm hearing from a lot of my other partners. I'd love to know what you're doing differently that maybe we can model. So I think it's just getting that conversation going. And as you've shared before, many others have shared before, everyone loves to talk about themselves. So just get them talking about themselves and then just know your product suite and what you can bring to the table enough to add sufficient value. And the hardest part is you'll probably get a good meeting. You'll probably have a good interaction. The key is getting that first deal and then the second one. If you can get one or two deals, then you can build that relationship. If you just have a lot of meetings, that would fall into my bucket of being busy but not being actually productive. And I don't want to be just out and about, making time. I want to actually see the fruits of the labor. So that would be the best approach I could counsel someone on right now, is to get that warm introduction and then just going curious and try to set the expectation of how you can help. And, we've talked about this in the coaching. It's like, it can be a two-prong appointment. Great. I'm going to go back to my office. I'm going to take some notes. Do you mind if I schedule a follow-up with you on how I could potentially add value? So you leave some of that curiosity and that mystique for maybe a follow-up so that they know that you're really invested.
So where would you suggest that a new originator go to get that warm referral? So like, I would imagine somebody listening and be like, great, but like, I don't know anybody who knows realtors right now. Like, how can you uncover some warm introductions?
So if you're brand spanking new, never closed your first loan, the best thing you can try to do is to find other vendors that would vouch for you or be willing to help you. So we're an attorney state. So one of our most valuable referral sources is our primary closing attorney. So it'd be a title rep in another state. Trying to find someone that you can partner with there. They know who the hitters are and they can carry a lot of weight for that warm introduction. Insurance agents and appraisers would be another easy place for things that should already be in your ecosystem or your world that you're having interaction with, because you want to have a team when you go to attack things. So you would need to have had at least a conversation with an appraiser of, hey, I'm going to put you in my panel and I'm going to be loyal to you and ask that you be loyal to me. By the way, do you know any realtors that perhaps I could have a conversation with? And would you be willing to make an introductory call for me, or can I use your name to open the door? Same thing on the insurance agents. They're going to have maybe fewer people that they know, but there's still going to be someone there. And then the title and attorneys would be a very strong one. And then just ask your sphere of influence. If you're going to get into this business, it's a sales business. You're going to have to talk to people. You got to know somebody. Just ask them, who'd you close with as a realtor and did you like them? And if they did, great. Can I call them and use your name, or would you mind sending them a text and say, I'm going to call you? I met Caleb. I think he's a great guy. You guys should connect. I mean, it's going to take that. And you may hear no 90 times, but you only need one or two to get your career started.
That's a beautiful way to end it. And yeah, that's exactly how I did it too. I had a first American title rep who introduced me to a few different agents back in the early days of my career. And that's how I got my at bats, I mean, so I think that a lot of originators can, fall short of realizing that this is a full contact sport and you need to get out there. You need to talk to people. You need to ask for help. You need to ask for warm introductions. And then once you get the ball rolling, then every loan that you do is another opportunity to cross-sell a listing agent or a CPA or a financial advisor that's associated with that loan. So Caleb, thanks so much, man, for taking the time out of your schedule here on a Friday afternoon. I know that you being on the Eastern time zone, you probably need to get home and have dinner with Priscilla. Make sure that she doesn't catch you talking to yourself, okay?
I can't promise that, but it was always a pleasure. I appreciate you letting me be a part of it.
Thanks so much, buddy. And thank you to everyone for listening in. And we'll look forward to coming back to you in 2 weeks with another episode of the 360 Experience. Take care, everyone. Have a productive day.